Hey beautiful people, you're welcome back to my channel. My name is Franklin from the Money Code Academy. Okay, so quickly, I saw a question the other day and quite a lot of people were debating on it. And the question says, should you rent a house or buy a house? Now, I saw a lot of comments. Some people said that renting of a house is just a complete waste of money. And some other people said it's better for you to buy. Some said that you shouldn't buy, it's better for you to rent. Okay, so I decided that I was going to do a video on this to analyze this very question, because I believe that there are many people who have found themselves in this situation. They found themselves in that place where they want to buy, but they are currently renting and they want to buy, but they don't know if they should go ahead and buy. So we are going to be talking about that in this very video coming up. Now, if this is your first time of coming to this channel, I talk about financial freedom, I talk about entrepreneurship, I talk about all things money, personal finance. So if these are the kind of videos that interest you, consider subscribing so that you don't miss another video when I post it. And don't forget to click on the notification bell so that the next time I post a new video, you'll be the first to receive that video. Now back to our question: should you rent or should you buy? Honestly, there are people with various opinions about this, but I'm just going to share with you my take. I believe that both of them, they are not a bad idea. To rent is a good thing, to buy is also a good thing. But if you have to choose between the both of them, it completely depends on the situation and circumstances of the individual. Now I'm going to be outlining some of these circumstances. The first one is location. There are some locations where renting is very cheap, such that at the end of the year, what you have spent renting, it's not so much. Now when it comes to that, then I believe that renting should be the best bet. The reason is because if you're not spending a fortune to rent, then the money that you have that you want to use to buy, you can actually invest that amount of money and use that money to generate some money for a couple of years before you talk about buying a property. So location, it matters a lot. But if, for example, you are living in a location where you are spending so much, because see, there are some locations, for example, in the States or in the Western world, where you have to spend so much money every year for renting. If you're living in such a location, it will be best for you to go ahead and buy a property. The reason is because instead of wasting the money to rent, for example, if at the end of the year you are spending so much money just to rent, you discover that at the end of 3 years, you cannot give account of whatever it is that you have done in the past 2 or 3 years. But if you are living in a location where you have to spend so much money every year, okay, just for rentals, and at the end of 3 years you've spent so much amount of money without anything to show for it, then it will be best for you to go and buy, so that at the end of 3 years you are able to say, okay, I spent this amount of money, but I spent it on my own house. Because what happens a lot of time is that if, for example, you are spending close to like $30,000 every year just to rent, or you're spending close to like maybe $15,000 or $20,000 just to rent, you discover that at the end of 3 years, you have spent close to like $60,000. And that $60,000, you just used it to enrich somebody else, or you just used it to help the person to pay their own mortgage for that very house. And after the 3 years, you have nothing to show for it. Because number one, you have no claims over that house. Number two, you are still house hunting. Okay, so if you were staying in a location where the rent house is very expensive, I would say that you should go ahead and buy up a property if you are able to do so. Now, this takes us to the next thing that needs to be considered, okay, which is your financial situation. If, for example, you don't have your emergency fund in place, you don't have a stable or steady source of income, and maybe you are employed somewhere and you know that there is no proper financial security, you can be kicked out of the job at any time, okay, I wouldn't advise you to go ahead and buy up a property. Because if you're buying up a property, it means you're going to be committed to the payment, okay, to the mortgage payment every month. And these may go on for several number of years. So if your job is not secured, your financial situation is not solid, you don't have all the necessary things in place like your retirement fund, you don't have emergency fund, you don't have these things in place, I don't advise that you go ahead and buy a house. It's better for you to rent, and it's better for you to rent while you focus on beefing up your emergency fund, while you focus on your retirement fund, while you focus on setting some things that will help you to secure your finances. There are things that you need to do to secure your finances. I'm going to be doing another video in that regard, okay? But I just want to encourage you, if you find yourself in such a situation whereby your financial situation is not as solid as it should be, then I wouldn't advise you to buy a house. But if you have all these things in place and your financial situation is solid, you have a solid financial security, you have something that is generating money for you every month, and it will continue to generate money for you for the next 5 years, for the next 7 years, then I will say go ahead, go and get a house, don't rent. So you're getting the point now. You're seeing it now that it depends on the circumstances. Now, another thing to consider here is your marital status. Okay, if for example you are yet to get married and you have the money to buy, but you are not yet married, it will be better for you to to still be renting. Okay, and while you are renting, push that money that you want to use to buy, push that money into an investment. Somebody will say, but come on, I thought buying a building is also an investment. It is an investment, but buildings, houses, these are not investment that immediately begins to generate money for you, especially if you're going to be living in the building. If, for example, you're going to buy, to lease out or to put it on rent, it's a totally different case. I would say go ahead and buy because you are using it as a business. But if you're going to be living in that apartment, I don't advise that you go ahead and buy. You are a bachelor, for crying out loud. You are a bachelor, you don't need so much space like that. You can still be renting while you put that money into an investment. And then when you are fully married, or when you're finally married and then the investment has yielded, then you can go ahead and buy. Another thing to consider again in this very thing is your age. If, for example, you are now 40 years or you are above 40 years and you still don't have a house, and you have the opportunity to buy a house, then I would say go ahead and buy a house. But then that is if your financial condition is also in place. The whole idea is that you shouldn't just make a decision to buy a house, because if you're going to be buying a house, it's a long-term decision. There are a lot of things that you need to consider. The house that you want to buy, is it something that you're going to get tired of within the next 2 to 3 years? You know, one of the beautiful things about renting is that you can stay in this house for 1 year or 2, and when you're tired of it, you can move to another apartment, and you can keep moving like that when you don't like that very place that you rented. So that is the advantage that comes with renting. But when it comes to buying, you cannot just buy a house and say, okay, I want to sell it after 2 years, or you want to sell it after 1 year. No. Even if you want to do such a thing, you will have to consider it. Selling a house is not so much an easy task. You get the point now. So when it comes to buying a house, it's a long-term decision. There are a whole lot of things that you need to put into consideration before you make such a decision. So it depends on an individual and the circumstances that is surrounding them. Another thing that we need to also consider here is a living condition. Let's take, for example, you are living in a certain apartment and you're paying so much money in that apartment, and you can easily pay that money for mortgage somewhere for a house that will be your own house. Okay, then why not? You can go ahead and, buy a house. But in a nutshell, what I'm saying is, so many things has to be considered. Location has to be considered. Financial situation has to be considered. Living condition has to be considered. Marital status has to be considered. Age also has to be considered. Now, when you have considered these things, then you can make a decision whether you should go ahead to rent or to buy. Now, I believe that this video has answered that question. So if, for example, you've been considering whether you want to buy or rent, put these things into consideration and use it to weigh your options. Whichever one that is better, that is what you should go for. So I'll speak to you again in the next video. Until then, I just want you to keep cracking the money code, and most importantly, sign up for my free course, The Power of Financial Education. I'll just put the link below. And also, I want to invite you to watch these videos that is now showing on your screen. I'll speak to you next time.